Hello everyone, this is Joshua Smith of Apollo's Artifacts. It is September of 2018. This episode is going to center around a question, which is why are there so many different topics and subjects about which we are not allowed to ask fundamental or deep and basic questions? You know, there's this whole list of things out there that you simply cannot be allowed to disagree on or have very serious questions about, and not all of these reflect my personal position on them or whatever. I just, throw them out there as, a series of ideas that are things that people can't talk about very much. So you have evolution, you have climate change, you have human origins, first Americans, comparative crime data, demographic changes, and immigration. You have all these subjects that you're really not allowed to ask deep and fundamental questions about. For example, when you look at evolution, you can't ask questions about how that process actually works. You can't ask deep fundamental questions about why there are particular flaws with the theory overall. So a lot of people will go along with things that you find in microevolution, but then there are really big problems when it comes to, say, macroevolution and speciation. And climate change, that one's obvious. I mean, you have all kinds of groups out there that are saying anybody who even asks questions about the concept of climate change or global warming or whatever else should be banned from even speaking. Why should you be banned from speaking or raising questions just because someone has proclaimed that there's a 98% consensus that has, arrived at some conclusion about it or whatever, which is really not epistemologically the way that science works at all. It doesn't just say, well, a consensus says X, therefore X is forever and always true and can't be questioned. Well, that isn't the way it works, but apparently it's being made to work that way right now in the politicized environment that we have. You have questions about human origins that you can't get into. You can't talk about the first Americans. You can't look into, say, various different diffusion theories or pre-Columbian transoceanic contacts that may have taken place between, say, Asia and the Americas or Africa and the Americas or Europe and the Americas and so on and so forth. You can't be allowed to talk about those things for all kinds of different reasons. But the one that I really want to get into is IQ. Why is it that we are not allowed to talk about IQ or have particular opinions about IQ? I mean, it's one of the most fundamental things found in psychology and psychometrics. I mean, it's one of the most well-established theories that are out there, and yet you still have people, very often people who have high IQs, who will try to deny the concept of IQ altogether. The irony of this should not be lost upon any of us. And perhaps they are best referred to as IQ denialist or IQ science denialism or something like that. But it's strange because you have these high IQ people who are always in high IQ environments and whatnot, and then they deny there's any validity to the concept, which is completely absurd if you think about it. I mean, a lot of times, when you know people who have extraordinarily low IQ, they don't doubt the concept that IQ exists, okay? It's only the people who are always in these professorial environments and whatnot, where everybody has a PhD or whatever, so they go around just thinking, well, everyone is similarly competent as I am and whatnot, but actually that is not the case at all. But I think one of the reasons it really touches a nerve for so many people is they have this real bizarre false equivalency in their mind that they think that IQ somehow relates to their value as a person, or their ethical value or their moral worth, or that it somehow links to their soul or something like that, like there's almost this spiritual measurement or whatever that's coming out of IQ. But I think this is a huge mistake. I mean, to me, IQ is just one number among many other numbers. I mean, it's just one measurement among all kinds of measurements that we can make of people, So nobody finds IQ controversial. Like, let's say you look at the NFL draft, the NFL combines and all this kind of stuff, right? So you have particular groups of people who always have really incredible 40 times, their timed runs in a 40-yard dash and all this. And you have certain other people who are really good at, say, putting up huge bench press numbers, like the total amount of weight that they can bench press or the total number of times that they can bench press a specific amount of weight, which I think is 225 pounds or something like that. So nobody finds any of those things controversial. They just look at the list and they're like, yeah, okay, this guy can run really fast, that guy can lift a lot of weights, but then you switch over to IQ and all of a sudden people are like, how dare you? How can you talk about this subject? How can you say this about someone that their IQ is higher or lower than someone else's? But they're really just facts of the world. We know this is the case, and the bell curve distribution is very much what we run into in everyday life. It often reminds me of the joke that Carlin had where he said, think about how dumb the average person is that you meet, and half of them are dumber than that. It's a really funny joke. It's probably statistically not actually true, but it's quite hilarious at the same time. But just speaking personally on the subject, I just really do not understand why people get so emotionally up in arms about what is just another number. It's just like a number of, what is in your savings account? How much are you paid per hour? How much do you make in a year? How tall are you? How much do you weigh? All this kind of stuff. And almost none of these things do people just have these absolute hissy fits over and all this kind of stuff. But yet when you come to IQ, all of a sudden it's this big problematic area that can't be talked about. So you have one faction that wants to say, well, IQ is invalid as a concept. You can't really measure it because all of the tests are biased. Well, they've done 50 or 60 or 70 or 100 years of trying to fix these tests to where they eliminate all of those forms of biases. They've been able to do cross-cultural studies. They've been able to do it in anthropology and sociology, psychiatry and psychology and all this kind of stuff. They have eliminated almost all of that stuff. All of it can be accounted for, okay? People don't seem to understand that. They just think these tests are really biased, and they are always asking about, say Western specific concepts or something like that. No, that's actually not the case. That's not what they're doing. They're talking about what is called G, which is generalized intelligence. It's a general factor where your intelligence can translate to all kinds of different fields in all kinds of different areas. You have multiple places where it can be applied. So then you have this other faction who's like, well, okay, you have IQ, but then you have multiple IQs, right? So you have like emotional intelligence and social intelligence and all this other kind of stuff, but really what IQ researchers have found is that this really solid middle area ground of G, or the overall IQ measurement, basically accounts for any and all of the differences that you can find even under the multiple intelligence theories and all that kind of stuff, that basically all of those theories fail and break down once you understand IQ overall. And the funny thing is, almost all of the world's leading IQ or G researchers are themselves political leftists and whatnot. You have James Flynn, who's a leftist. You have Richard Hayer, who I follow on Twitter, is a leftist. He's written a great book that I've talked about on my show before and all that kind of stuff. You can check that one out. I'll link it below. But I think the way that we could really move the topic and the conversation forward on that kind of thing is that people really need to disabuse themselves of this bizarre misconception that they think that IQ somehow relates to their value as a human being or their dignity or something like that. It doesn't have anything to do with that at all. It is just one more number among many other numbers. Your value or worth or your spirit or your soul or whatever it is that you think you have and all this kind of thing is not affected in any way by whatever your IQ is. There are very high IQ people who are incredibly malevolent and dark and evil and plotting and scheming and all this sort of stuff, and then you have low IQ people who also engage in nefarious acts and all this kind of stuff. Then you have high IQ people who are very kind and loving and generous and all this kind of stuff. There's no correlation whatsoever between those factors, okay? So that's something that people really just need to put out of their minds. You have got to move on from this whole idea of linking IQ to your worth or value as a person. And there's a whole other group of people who oppose IQ as a concept and IQ research and all this kind of stuff because they track it back to its beginnings and they say, well, all of the people who were involved in this sort of research early on, well, they were sexist, they were bigots, they were misogynists, they were racists and all this sort of stuff. Some of them were eugenicists and all this, and they had plans to use it for eugenics policies and all that kind of thing. And this is actually the commission of a particular type of logical fallacy, which is called the root fallacy, which is to say that something is bad because its beginnings were bad, but really that isn't the case, and you can see how this has changed over time to where those kinds of people have been expurgated from the field. They're not a part of those fields of research anymore. And nor should you want people like that being involved in that kind of stuff, But in terms of worries about eugenics plans or policies or something like that, that to me also doesn't make any sense, because a lot of the research that's going on right now is that if they can actually pinpoint this to, say, specific genes or something like that, or certain genetic traits or whatever that undergird what brings out IQ to manifest, itself as G. Well, if you can manipulate those factors, maybe there would be a smart pill that could be invented one day. Maybe there's certain types of genetic alterations that could be made to enhance human intelligence, or say human memory capacities or something like that. I mean, this is stuff people really have to think about, because we are in this era that is just prior to the development of, say, artificial intelligence, and if not true AI. I know there are a lot of people out there who are really upset about the concept of AI as well, and they say, well, there will never be any such thing as true AI the way it's presented in movies and all this kind of stuff. Well, fine, set that to the side. Let's say something that just sufficiently imitates AI so to where it can confuse most people. Let's say they get really close to something like that. Well, in order for humans to be able to keep up, or in order for humans to be able to compete with something like that, they're going to have various ways of enhancing themselves. This is what futurologists talk about all the time in terms of cybernetics, and the way that humans are going to have to basically morph themselves, morph their bodies and their minds and all this kind of stuff around what is going to be taking place in the future. There's going to be ways to enhance strength, enhance speed. So why not enhance, say, memory, or memory retaining information, or processing speed, or something like that? These are all things that people need to think about. I mean, you don't want to be sitting around 50 years from now and being blown away by all of the computer technology and AI that's rapidly overtaking the world, to where you're basically something that's in big trouble, shall we say. But ultimately, what I'm trying to say in terms of all of this in relation to IQ, since it's just one more number among many, it shouldn't be seen as any more controversial than, like, what is your average time when running a mile, right? What is your average time when you run a 100-meter dash or something like that? I mean, it's just another number. And it's really, really strange, to me anyway, why people get so upset about it as a concept. Anyway, be sure to subscribe, like, share, and all of that. Thank you.